The U.S. military says it has struck 4 more alleged drug smuggling boats in the eastern Pacific Ocean, killing 14 people on board, with 1 survivor. We have CNN anchor and chief national security analyst Jim Sciutto with us now. Jim, what do we know about these strikes?
Well, listen, I mean, these are now familiar videos, right? We see these almost every day. The airborne video of the strike as you hit these alleged narco-terrorist boats, that's the term you hear from the administration. In this case, this is taking place on the Pacific side, right? And they began on the Atlantic side, in the Caribbean, et cetera, closer to the Venezuelan coast. And the administration in recent days and weeks has now expanded where they're striking here. There are the obvious legal questions. The administration says intelligence indicates that these are drug smuggling boats. Is there any legal process to doing this? Is there any recourse for those involved in this, especially now that you have survivors, right, of some of these strikes? Those are open questions, but what is certainly true is they're becoming more frequent and they're taking place on a broader geographical kind of swath in Latin America. And, you know, the question is if they broaden even further.
And they're expanding, the U.S. military, expanding its presence in the Caribbean.
This is a big deal. So they have the USS Gravely, which is a guided missile destroyer, now in Trinidad and Tobago, quite close to Venezuela. You have a U.S. aircraft carrier on its way now from the Mediterranean, the USS Gerald Ford, which happens to be the newest and most capable U.S. aircraft carrier in the world. And you also have more land forces in and around the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, et cetera. What I'm told by folks briefed on the intelligence is that at a minimum, they're giving the president a wide range of options here, right? And you could look at that just based on the kinds of hardware you have in the region right now. There's also a special forces support ship that has shown up in the Caribbean. Doesn't mean, you know, he's taken that step. Doesn't mean he's going to use all of those options, but at least the forces that are now in the region gives the president enormous options here. Interesting, CSIS, the think tank, has said that the arrival of an aircraft carrier is one marker they've used to predict at least the possibility of an invasion. Again, doesn't mean an invasion's happening or that the president will ever order one, but you have such an array of resources there now that the president's list of options is growing.
They're saying you couldn't do one probably without the carrier, right?
Exactly.
So it sort of it opens up that possibility. And in the middle of all this, you have a Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, talking about mercenaries.
He says he's now claiming they've made a series of arrests of what could be a group of mercenaries trained and financed by the CIA. We don't know what he's basing this on. He's an authoritarian leader. He picks up people all the time. But what's key about this is that President Trump and other administration officials have said quite publicly that the U.S. has CIA operatives on the ground, and CNN has reported this as well. So they're nervous there, right? And they're looking for, I'm sure they're looking for these teams and anybody tied to these teams. And probably this is part of a fear operation by the Maduro regime to strike fear in the minds of anybody who might come into contact with them or might think about working with them, right? Because there is some hope here that by carrying out these operations, both military and otherwise, that the U.S. can weaken the Maduro regime, who they accuse of being part of the drug trafficking operations.
Yeah, questions about whether some of what's going on could be about regime change, right?
Exactly.
Out there. Jim Sciutto, thank you so much for taking us through all of
Thanks
that.
so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
The U.S. military says it struck 4 more boats in the Pacific Ocean, killing 14 people. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth claims the boats were involved in drug trafficking, but like the many other cases, provided no evidence. CNN's Zachary Cohen joins me now live from our newsroom. What are you hearing from your sources, Zach?
Yeah, Dana, this is the first time that we know of where the U.S. military has conducted multiple military strikes in the same day. 3 strikes against 4 boats on Monday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says 14, quote, narco-terrorists were killed in the strikes. But as you mentioned again, providing no real evidence to justify that label. There was also 1 survivor, according to Hegseth. We've seen this happen recently. As recently as last week, there were additional strikes in this same region in the eastern Pacific Ocean where there were, again, survivors of these strikes that were first detained by the U.S. Navy and then repatriated back to their home countries of Ecuador and Colombia. In this case, though, the status of the survivor really remains unclear. The Pentagon saying that Mexican authorities have the responsibility and are taking the lead on the search and rescue for this survivor. The Mexican authorities, the Mexican president has acknowledged awareness of a military operation in international waters and an alleged survivor, but so far no indication that this person is in their custody. So this will continue to be something that we'll watch as the legal authority for these U.S. military strikes continues to come under question by both lawmakers on the Democratic and Republican sides of the aisle.
Right.
We know Rand Paul, a Republican, has really repeatedly questioned the Trump administration's legal authority here, and the growing number of survivors from these strikes also raises additional questions.
Yeah, no question. Thank you so much, Zach. Appreciate it. And Elena Treen joins us here at the table. Yes, we've heard many, many times Pete Hegseth and other members of the Trump administration say that they have legal authority because it is a, quote, war, a drug war. But the fact that this continues, and as Zach said, this is one of the few issues that Republicans are raising their hands, not just Rand Paul, but others as well, saying, wait a second, show us the evidence. This is a very big deal.
No, that's exactly right. And it actually was surprising to me, to be honest, that we're starting to hear from more and more Republicans. It actually took them a long time to get to this point. But now it's very clear that they want more information, particularly as we know that this is only escalating further. They're moving, an airstrike carrier, an aircraft strike, a carrier that would carry, the type of planes that they would need to potentially take the further step of striking on land. We reported last week that there are plans on the table that the president is considering about striking what they refer to as cocaine facilities and other places, drug routes inside Venezuela. And that's what I told will be the biggest turning point, is when they move away from these strikes in international waters and potentially toward those land targets. Because a lot of people, and one of the concerns I'm hearing from a lot of Republicans, is that they do believe so much of this is about regime change in Venezuela. Yeah. It's not about really just stopping the flow of drugs into the United States. And that's the issue that has a lot of people, of course, concerned about this, let alone, of course, the implications of the Constitution.
Little thing like the Constitution. But on that note, it will be interesting to see what happens if there is indeed a survivor of one of these latest strikes. Because one of the many other ones, there were 2 survivors, and they repatriated them. If they're so dangerous, one of the questions that we're even hearing from these Republican lawmakers is, why not try them or find a way to figure out information from them? Because what they wanted with these strikes was to kill them in the middle of the ocean.
I think there's been very little transparency about what is actually going on. We were talking earlier in today's show about what I would say some Democrats call kind of the war within, which is the immigration crackdown. And I don't think it is in any ways separate. It is very much linked to what we see with this war outside happening in the Caribbean and now in the Pacific. And I think that is what is so interesting. We keep hearing about this happening in the Trump administration's words, because these are narco-terrorists, these are, in their view, dangerous criminals, and that is the pretext for this all, but he hasn't really provided a whole lot of evidence to that sort. And I think one of the big questions that we've had, in fact, we just did this actually as an episode on our BBC show, is looking at what is the underlying concern with Venezuela. Venezuela is not a major market for producing fentanyl. That is, in fact, largely coming up from China and Mexico. So if it's really going after Venezuela, then what's it about? Because it's not that they're the major producer of fentanyl.
I think she hit the nail on the head, regime change.
Fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.